Hi, I'm Randy, that Geeky Maker, and today I'm going to make a display stand for this lightsaber. Back in the late 1970s when I first saw Star Wars, there was two things I knew I wanted to have. One was my very own astromech droid. Careful what you wish for. The second was this, Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. This is what we call a Graflex Lightsaber because the prop department at Star Wars made these by taking an old vintage Graflex camera, taking the flash handle off, adding a few grips and a few doodads here and there, and that became the lightsaber. Unfortunately, in recent years, the real Graflex flash handles have become quite rare and expensive, but luckily there's a group of lightsaber enthusiasts out there who make some pretty amazing replicas, and this is a Corband Sabers Graflex 2.5 kit that I recently put together. And I had a lot of fun doing the project, deciding what was going to go inside. There's a 3D printed chassis in there with a glowing kyber crystal and everything, and all the stuff that you need to make it have sound and light. And now I need a place to display it. And I could really easily just take a piece of wood, a couple of acrylic holders, and a nameplate, and I think that would work just fine. But I want something that looks like it came out of a Star Wars movie. Maybe something that looks like a Star Wars control panel, or what I might imagine a lightsaber repair and maintenance station might look like if that was such a thing. Or maybe one day Luke just found a piece of junk on the battlefield that he thought his lightsaber would look good on, and he put that in his quarters, and that's where he would keep his lightsaber when he went to bed at night. Is that so? You? Well, yeah, but I always thought Luke just guided the lightsaber into his hand with the Force. Of course it was. Let's start building. I'm going to start by cutting up some 1/4-inch MDF for the top and bottom. The side pieces are going to be made out of some 1/2-inch MDF scrap that I had lying around the shop. Like Indiana Jones, I'm just kind of making this up as I go along, so I'm trying to see here how good of a fit I can get for the lightsaber. I decided to cut the side pieces down at an angle so that the front would slope forward and give it a more control panel kind of look. Now it's time for some basic assembly. Nothing fancy here, just some wood glue and some pins to hold it in place while the glue dries. I cut down this piece of MDF to serve as the bottom, and I need a way to attach it so that I can remove it later so I can have access to the inside. I'm going to glue these pieces of hardwood in the corners sitting right on top of that bottom piece so it'll be perfectly flush with the bottom, and these will give me a place to put some screws later. Now this piece sits perfectly flush with the bottom and I can add some screws. Now that I have a removable bottom piece, I can figure out exactly what I'm going to do with the top part here. I went ahead and cut out the top pieces and marked out some areas where I'm going to cut some openings. To give it some more depth, these openings will allow you to see down inside of the stand where some additional components will be lit up with LEDs. I cut the round openings first using a hole saw and a Forstner bit. After drilling some holes for blade access, I cut the larger rectangular opening out on the scroll saw. Once I decide which direction the top piece should go, I'll go ahead and glue it in place. I think this way looks good. Some putty will take care of any gaps, and then it's time for a whole lot of sanding. MDF is a great material to work with, but the downside is that it soaks up paint like a sponge. Before priming it, I used some spray lacquer to seal it, but I'm still on the lookout for the best product to seal MDF with. After a couple of coats of primer, it was ready for paint. And here it is painted. I also went ahead and painted the bottom board and added some extra pieces of wood to hold the Greeblies. Oh yeah, I guess I should explain what Greeblies are. Greebly is a word used to describe all the little bits and pieces of texture added to props in science fiction movies that make them look more mechanical and interesting. For a much better explanation, I'll leave a link in the description to one of my favorite YouTube channels, the Smugglers Room, which inspired this project. Brian is the Greebly expert, and he's building his own Star Wars room in his basement. You should definitely check out his video, but for now, let's take a look at some examples here on my Gonk Droid. This is a pipe fitting that I painted and added a few screws to. And here we have another PVC pipe fitting, a couple of integrated circuit chip sockets, and one of those weird plastic things that are sometimes on charging cables. This is a piece of a circuit board from a broken DVD player. And these are those cups you use to hold ketchup at a restaurant. Almost anything can be a Greebly. Here are some Greeblies I'm going to be using on this project. This is a circuit board from a networking switch, a couple of pieces of a broken security camera, a reflector from a halogen bulb, an air hose fitting, and 3 pieces that I cut off of a broken sprinkler valve from my backyard. I think I'll use this piece here. I just need to cover up the logo and give it some paint. You can even add Greeblies to your Greeblies. Here I'm adding a pop rivet, a cap head screw, and an old cable connector. What is this thing supposed to be? I have no idea. That's why we call it a Greebly. To make it look more unrecognizable, I painted the circuit board silver, and now I'm going to add some dark wash to it. This stuff will settle in all the low areas and make the details pop out a lot more. I don't want this prop to look clean because it's from the Rebellion and not the Empire, so here I'm brushing on some grime and rust effects. I made these pieces to hold the lightsaber, and now I just have to fasten them in place. I'm using some super glue to hold them in place temporarily until I figure out where the screws go. The super glue can easily be popped off, so I know where to drill. And now I can add some screws for extra strength. Now it's time to start adding some details to make this control panel look like, well, a control panel. I'm using some styrene here to create some edge detail, and I need it to bend around this curve. So I'm just going to heat it with a heat gun until it's soft and then hold it in place until it gets cool. Here's another technique I picked up on the Smugglers Room. I painted this piece silver to look like metal, and now I'm adding some liquid mask to it. You can also use mustard for this. Now I sprayed on some primer and let that dry, and I'm going over the same area with the liquid mask, only covering a slightly larger area. After painting, you can go ahead and peel the liquid mask away and you get a cool two-tiered paint chipping effect. To fasten these down, I'm going to use some pop rivets that I painted to match. I like how when the riveter presses against the paint on the rivet, it chips a little bit of it away. Instant weathering. And here's our completed control panel. To give it a more metallic look, I'm going to dry brush on some gunmetal colored paint. To do this, you get a little paint on the brush and then wipe most of it off on some paper. And then you just lightly brush it against the surface, which picks up the raised details. And of course, we need a Rebel Alliance logo. Once again, using pop rivets, I'm fastening the control panel to the base. I really like the way the control panel turned out, so I decided to make a couple more. Styrene can easily be cut by scoring it with a knife and snapping it. Here's where I'm going to use that halogen lamp reflector Greebly. The more raised details you add, the more interesting it will look. Later, this piece is going to hold some 5mm LEDs. After dry brushing, this one's almost ready to go. Here I'm using some rub and buff to make some of the parts look more shiny. And last, this orange disc will add a little pop of Rebel Alliance color. After these last control panel pieces, we'll be ready for the finishing touches. And now comes my favorite part, adding the Greeblies. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you'd like to see more, please consider subscribing to my channel. We'll see you next time, and may the Force be with you.